Story 1. The guest in the spare room. This happened back in late 2021. I was in a weird transitional period in my life, between apartments and looking for a way to save money. My grandparents had passed away a while back, and their old house was sitting empty, caught in that limbo of probate and family indecision. It was fully furnished, stuck in the 1970s, and honestly a little creepy. But when my parents offered to let me stay there rent-free for a few months while I sorted myself out, I couldn't say no. The house was big, drafty, and made all those settling noises that old houses make. Groans in the pipes, creaks in the floorboards. I wasn't thrilled about being there alone, but I told myself it was just for a season. 2 months went by without incident. I fell into a routine: work, home, dinner, sleep. The house became just a place to crash. That changed on a Tuesday evening in November. I got home from work around 6 p.m. The sun was already down, the sky a bruised purple. I parked in the driveway and walked to the mailbox at the end of the lawn. As I was leafing through the junk mail, my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, waved me down from her porch. Mrs. Gable was a sweet, elderly woman who kept a close eye on the neighborhood. We chatted a few times. She knew my grandparents well and knew I was staying there alone. "Philip," she called out, shuffling down her walkway. She looked concerned, wringing her hands together. "Hey, Mrs. Gable. Everything okay?" I asked. She frowned, looking past me at the dark house. "I wanted to check on you. I saw you weren't home earlier. Your car was gone, but I saw someone moving around inside." I froze. "What do you mean?" "In the living room window," she said, pointing a shaky finger. "About noon. I was walking my dog, and I saw a figure walk past the curtains. I thought maybe you had taken the day off, but then I saw your car was gone and I got worried." My stomach did a little flip. "Are you sure? Maybe it was a reflection?" She looked unsure now, not wanting to scare me. "Well, maybe. My eyes aren't what they used to be, but it looked like a person." I thanked her and tried to play it cool, but inside, I was rattled. I walked up the driveway, staring at the house. It looked dark and silent. It looked empty. "It's crazy," I told myself. "Why would anyone be in my dead grandparents' house? There's nothing here to steal." I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air was stale and cold. Everything was locked. Nothing was out of place. No muddy footprints, no broken glass. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. She's just an old lady seeing things, I thought. It was a reflection of a tree branch or a cloud. I spent the rest of the evening trying to normalize things. I made a frozen pizza, watched some mindless TV, and tried to ignore the feeling of being watched. It was Friday, so I didn't have work the next day. I stayed up late, binge-watching a show until my eyes burned. By 1 a.m., I had completely forgotten about Mrs. Gable's warning. I turned off the TV, plunging the downstairs into darkness, and headed up the stairs. The staircase in that house was steep and wooden, amplifying every step. Creak, creak, creak. I reached the second-floor landing. The layout upstairs was old school. My room, the master bedroom, was at the end of the hall. It was a strange suite. You walked into the bedroom area, but to get to the bathroom you had to walk through a small, narrow connecting hallway that had a closet on one side and an old, built-in vanity desk on the other. I walked into my room and turned on the bedside lamp. I started to undress, tossing my work shirt on the chair. I needed to brush my teeth, so I turned toward the little hallway that led to the bathroom. And that's when my heart stopped. There was a light on. Not the bathroom light. The light in the little connecting hallway, the vanity area. I stood there, staring at it, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. To understand why this was terrifying, you have to understand the fixture. It was ancient, a single, bare bulb screwed into the ceiling with a pull-string switch. A thin, dirty string that you had to physically yank to turn on or off. I never used that light. Ever. The bulb was dim and useless. And because it was a pull string, you couldn't accidentally flip it on with a switch on the wall. You had to stand there and pull it. I walked slowly toward the vanity. The light was casting a sickly yellow glow on the old wallpaper. I stared at the string. It was swaying ever so slightly. Mrs. Gable's words came rushing back. I saw someone moving around inside. I felt a cold prickle of sweat on the back of my neck. Okay, Philip, calm down, I thought. Maybe the mechanism is faulty. Maybe it shorted out and turned itself on. Maybe I pulled it this morning and forgot. I reached up and pulled the string. Click. Took force. A solid tug. It wasn't something that happened by accident. The light went out, plunging the little hallway back into shadow. I should have left. Looking back, I know that. I should have grabbed my keys and ran out the front door. But denial is a powerful drug. I was tired. It was 1 a.m. I didn't want to believe that someone was in the house with me. I wanted to believe in electrical ghosts. I went into the bathroom, brushed my teeth with the door open, watching the dark bedroom behind me in the mirror. Paranoia was setting in. Every settling noise of the house sounded like a footstep. I went back to the bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the bed. I didn't get under the covers. I just sat there listening. 30 minutes passed. My heart rate wouldn't go down. The silence of the house felt heavy, like it was pressing in on my eardrums. I kept staring at the bedroom door. I have to check, I thought. I can't sleep unless I check. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I opened my bedroom door and looked out into the main hallway. It was pitch black. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. The beam cut through the dust motes dancing in the air. I walked past the linen closet, past the bathroom. There was one other room upstairs, the spare bedroom. It was where my grandparents kept all their old junk. Boxes of clothes, old furniture, a dusty mattress on a frame in the corner. I reached the door to the spare room. It was cracked open a few inches. I pushed it open. The beam of my flashlight swept across the room. Boxes stacked against the wall. An old rocking chair. The bed in the corner. My breath hitched. There was a shape on the bed. It wasn't just a pile of blankets. It was the distinct, rising curve of a shoulder. A hip. Someone was under the covers. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind screaming at me to run, but my body refusing to obey. I watched the shape. It was rising and falling slightly. Breathing. I took a stumbling step backward. The floorboard under my foot let out a loud, pistol shot crack. The reaction was instantaneous. The figure on the bed shot up. The blankets fell away. It was a man. He was wearing dirty clothes, his hair matted. He wasn't asleep. His eyes were wide open, alert, staring right into the beam of my flashlight. He had been lying there, awake, listening to me walk down the hall. He swung his legs off the bed, his eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying intensity. That broke my paralysis. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound, and spun around. I heard him hit the floor behind me. Heavy footsteps. Fast. I sprinted down the hallway, practically falling down the steep wooden stairs. I didn't look back. I could hear him behind me, the heavy thump-thump-thump of his boots on the stairs. I hit the front door, fumbled with the deadbolt for a terrifying second that felt like an hour, threw it open, and burst out into the cold night air. I didn't stop at my car. I ran across the lawn, screaming for help, and pounded on Mrs. Gable's front door until she turned the porch light on. She let me in, terrified, and called 911. The police arrived in under 10 minutes. They swept the house with guns drawn. He was gone. They found the back door wide open. He had run out right after me and vanished into the woods behind the property. But here is the part that keeps me up at night. In the weeks that followed, my parents did a full inventory. Nothing was missing. No jewelry, no electronics, no silverware. He wasn't a thief. The police think he was a squatter who had been living there for a while. But I had been there for 2 months. I was home every night. He knew I was there. He knew my schedule. And that night, when I found the light on, he had been in my room moments before I walked in. He had been standing in that little hallway, maybe watching me undress, maybe waiting for me to go to sleep. And if I hadn't checked that spare room, if I had just gone to sleep in my bed, I don't know if I would have woken up. Story 2. The empty gas station. I hate driving at night. There is something about the isolation of the highway that gets into your head. But when you have a 14-hour drive and you're too cheap for a hotel, you do stupid things. I was driving back from visiting family, cutting through a stretch of country that was basically just pine trees and asphalt. It was around midnight when the fatigue started to hit. My eyes were heavy, the white lines of the road blurring together. I needed caffeine. Badly. I saw a sign for gas and pulled off the highway. It wasn't a big truck stop. It was a small, 2-lane road that wound into the dense forest. I drove for about 10 minutes, wondering if I had missed a turn, until I saw the lights. It was an old gas station. No branding, just a faded sign that said, gas. The lights were dim, flickering slightly. The canopy over the pumps was rusted. But what struck me was the parking lot. It was crowded. There were 4 other cars parked haphazardly around the pumps and near the front door. At 1 a.m., in the middle of nowhere, that was weird. I figured maybe it was a popular spot for locals or maybe shift workers meeting up. I pulled up to a pump away from the others. I got out, stretched my legs, and walked toward the convenience store. The windows were dirty, plastered with old advertisements. I couldn't see inside. I pushed the door open. A little bell jingled overhead. I stepped inside and froze. The store was brightly lit, the fluorescent tubes humming loudly. But the shelves were empty, completely bare. No chips, no soda, no motor oil. Just rows of dusty metal shelving. Standing in the aisles were 5 men. They weren't shopping. They were just standing. They were dressed in rough clothes, flannels, work boots, heavy jackets. When the bell rang, every single one of them stopped what they were doing, which was nothing, and turned their heads in unison to look at me. It wasn't a casual glance. It was a stare. Predatory, dead-eyed stare. The silence was deafening. No music. No cashier. Just the hum of the lights and 5 men staring at me like I was a bacteria under a microscope. My brain screamed, "Run." Sorry," I mumbled, backing up. "Wrong place." I didn't wait for a response. I turned, pushed back out the door, and power-walked to my car. I could feel their eyes on my back through the glass. I jumped into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and tore out of the parking lot. My hands were shaking on the wheel. What was that? I thought. A cult? A drug deal? I got back onto the desolate 2-lane road, checking my rearview mirror constantly. 10 minutes passed. I started to relax. Just a weird encounter, I told myself. Forget it. Then I saw headlights. Car was coming up behind me. Fast. I was already doing 15 over the limit, but this car was closing the gap rapidly. The high beams were blinding in my mirror. Then more lights. A second car. Then a third. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a convoy. The first car swerved into the left lane to pass me. I let off the gas, hoping he would just fly by. He pulled alongside me, and for a split second, I looked over. The windows were tinted. I couldn't see the driver. He cut the wheel hard. He merged directly in front of me, inches from my bumper. And then he slammed on his brakes. I screamed, stomping on my own brake pedal. My tires screeched, smoke filling the air. I fishtailed, barely keeping the car on the road. I came to a halt just inches from his rear bumper. I looked in the rear view. The second car had stopped right behind me, boxing me in. The third car pulled up on my left side, blocking the driver's door. They had me trapped. Doors started opening. I saw the men getting out. The same men from the gas station. They were moving with purpose, reaching into their waistbands, reaching under their seats. Panic is a funny thing. It either paralyzes you or it makes you crazy. I didn't think. I threw my car into drive, cranked the wheel hard to the right, and floored it. My car jumped the ditch, slamming down into the tall grass and dirt. I bounced violently, my head hitting the roof. I saw the tree line coming up fast. Thud, thud. I was off-road, weaving between tree trunks. The car was shaking apart. I made it maybe 50 yards into the woods before I hit a stump and the car died. Steam hissed from the hood. I grabbed my phone and bailed. I didn't even close the door. I just ran. I sprinted into the pitch-black forest, tripping over roots, my face whipping against branches. Behind me, I heard shouting. I heard car doors slamming. I heard footsteps crashing through the brush. Over here. Spread out, someone yelled. They were hunting me. I ran until I couldn't breathe. I found a thick cluster of bushes and crawled inside, curling into a ball. I turned my phone off completely, no light, no sound. I laid there in the dirt, listening. I could hear them. They were sweeping the woods. I saw flashlight beams cutting through the trees, sweeping back and forth like searchlights. They were close. I could hear their boots crunching on the dry leaves. Find him, a voice growled. It sounded close, maybe 20 yards away. I held my breath. I squeezed my eyes shut. I prayed. I laid there for what felt like hours. Slowly, the voices moved away. The flashlight beams faded. Eventually, I heard engines starting up back on the road. Car doors slamming. Tires spinning on gravel. Then silence. I didn't move. I stayed in that bush for another full hour, shivering in the cold, too terrified to even check the time. Finally, when the sun started to bleed gray light through the trees, I turned my phone on. I had 1 bar of service. I texted 911. Took the police 40 minutes to find me. They found my car abandoned in the woods. The other cars were gone. The tow truck driver said I was lucky. He said people go missing on these roads all the time. I don't know what I walked into that night. A trafficking ring? A drop-off? I don't know. But the look in their eyes when I walked into that empty store, they weren't surprised to see me. They looked like they had been waiting for someone. Anyone. And when I ran, they didn't just want to scare me off. You don't box a car in on a highway just to scare them. They wanted to stop me. They wanted to take me. Story 3. The bait car. This happened just a few days ago. The fear is still fresh. I'm writing this down because I need to get it out of my head. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The kind of place where people walk their dogs and leave their garage doors open. I had a couple of days off work, so I decided to have a lazy Tuesday night. I ordered some food on DoorDash, just a burger and fries from a local spot. I was sitting on my couch, watching YouTube, waiting for the food. The app said the driver was about 45 minutes out. Around 8 p.m., I got up to stretch and glanced out the front window. There was a car in my driveway. It wasn't the delivery driver. The app showed him 10 minutes away. This was a dark sedan, older model, beat up. It was parked right behind my car, blocking me in. I frowned. Did a friend stop by? I checked my phone. No texts. I looked closer. I couldn't see inside the car clearly. The streetlights were dim. But I could see the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat. They were just sitting there. I'm not a confrontational person. I figured maybe they were lost, looking up directions on their phone. I decided to wait it out. 10 minutes later, the DoorDash driver pulled up. He parked on the street because the driveway was blocked. I watched him walk up the path, glancing at the strange car. I opened the door to take the food. "Hey," I asked the driver, keeping my voice low. "Did you see who's in that car?" The driver looked back over his shoulder. "Yeah, saw a guy in the front seat. He was just staring straight ahead. Didn't look at me. Weird." I thanked him, took the food, and locked the door. I sat back down on the couch, but my appetite was gone. I kept glancing at the window. The car was still there. 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Bang, bang, bang. 3 heavy, deliberate knocks. My heart leaped into my throat. I stood up, staring at the door. I didn't move. I waited a full minute. Silence. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. The porch was empty, but the car was still in the driveway. I decided I had to do something. This was getting ridiculous. I grabbed my phone, took a deep breath, and opened the front door. I stepped out onto the porch. "Can I help you?" I called out toward the driveway. Silence. I walked down the steps, my anger overcoming my fear. I walked right up to the driver's side window of the sedan. It was empty. The car was empty. A chill ran down my spine. I looked around the yard. "Hello." I walked to the back of the car to get the license plate number. There wasn't one. No plate. Just the empty screw holes where a plate should be. That's when the realization hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a lost driver. This was a setup. A bait car. The driver didn't leave. He's still here. Panic spiked in my chest. I turned around and speed-walked back to my front door. I hurried inside, slammed the door, and locked the deadbolt. I leaned against the door, breathing hard. The house felt different. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and the air pressure feels wrong? Felt like that. The silence was too heavy. I walked into the living room. I looked at the coffee table where I had left my phone when I went outside. It was gone. My blood turned to ice. I had just been outside for maybe 90 seconds. In that time, someone had come in. Creak. The sound came from the hallway behind me. The hallway leading to the bedrooms. I froze. I heard the soft, shuffling sound of footsteps on carpet. Someone was walking down the hall toward the living room. But then they stopped. Just around the corner. Just out of sight. They were waiting for me. I knew with absolute certainty that if I walked around that corner, I was dead. My eyes darted to the back door, through the kitchen. It was maybe 20 feet away. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think. I exploded into motion. I sprinted for the kitchen. "Lauren!" A voice boomed from the hallway. A deep, rasping male voice. He didn't just yell, "Hey." He yelled my name. My first name. I hit the kitchen, sliding on the tile in my socks. I scrambled for the back door, unlocking it with trembling fingers. "Lauren Smith," he screamed. My full name. First and last. I threw the door open and burst into the backyard. I heard heavy footsteps charging through the kitchen behind me. I didn't look back. I ran across the grass, vaulted the low fence into the neighbor's yard, and kept running. I ran until I hit the next street over. I flagged down a car, a terrified teenage girl who almost didn't stop, and begged her to call the police. When the cops arrived, the sedan was gone. But they found my phone. It was lying in the middle of my front lawn. He had thrown it there before he drove off. Here is the thing that terrifies me the most. He didn't take anything. He didn't steal my laptop, my wallet, or my TV. He stole my phone to stop me from calling for help. He parked a decoy car in my driveway to lure me outside. He waited for me to leave the door unlocked for just a second so he could slip in. And he knew my name. He knew exactly who I was. I'm moving next week. I can't stay in that house. Every time I hear a floorboard creak, I hear his voice screaming my name from the darkness of the hallway. Host/narrator. These stories remind us that the monsters aren't under the bed. They are waiting in the driveway, hiding in the spare room, or boxing you in on a lonely highway. If these stories kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and lets me bring you more true horror. And I have a question for you tonight. In the first story, if you found a light on in a room you never use, would you investigate or would you run? Let me know in the comments. Stay safe out there. And remember, check your back seat.